Where are we at in society today? Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
Go ahead. Make my day.
Every single week, I put my freaking heart and soul into this. I don't go out there and laugh. It's not funny. It's not fun. Nothing's funny to me. I don't want to go out there and get embarrassed on Monday Night Football in front of everybody.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
So ain't nothing changed from yesterday. Still the same person I was yesterday. And I got the same thing for you that I had yesterday. You know why I'm here.
You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. That's the great thing about sports. You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out. Because it matters.
Hey, good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome, X's and Bros, Monday through Friday, 6 until 9. Red Wings scored 5 unanswered. Looked really good last night, didn't they? And beating the Kings 5-2. Down 2-0 early, especially that second goal. You would think that would take and suck the life right out of you. I mean, Mo Sider kind of trying to flip it around the near side post and said, sneaks it in his own net. But Lucas Raymond responds right away with a backhand, beautiful goal. Number 20 on the year, had 3 assists as well. He's been on a major role. Alex DeBrincat powers home his 21st goal of the season. Elmer Soderblom buried his first. Marco Kasper was awesome last night. I mean, you talk about the young guys in sports. We mentioned that a lot with the Lions and, of course, the Tigers as well. The Lions with a lot of their core. They're still young. I mean, people forget that. That's why when people talk about a window for the Lions, I immediately say, Penny Sewell's a young player. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a young player. Jahmyr Gibbs, a young player. Sam Laporta, a young player. Jamison Williams, a young player. Aiden Hutchinson, young player. Aline McNeil, young player. Jack Campbell, young player.
The Lions list is probably longer than everybody's.
Brian Branch, young player. Terrion Arnold. I just named 11 guys. Those are all young players. Forget the window stuff, all right? Stop using cliches with that. But the Red Wings young players have been really good too. And you don't have to be a rookie, I don't think, to be a young player. You could be a very young pro like a Lucas Raymond, like a Mo Sider. They're still young players, right? Marco Kasper, really good, notched a pair of goals, including a hell of a goal in which he shoots, it's saved, and as he's falling down, flips it into the net, got his own rebound. It was awesome. Finished with 3 points. Now it's 11 points in his last 10 games. Detroit now on a 3-game roll. The Kings have lost 4 of 5. Pistons fall to the Cavaliers on the road, 110-91. The Cavs snapping a 3-game slide behind 6 players reaching double figures, led by Darius Garland's 22. Donovan Mitchell had 21. Evan Mobley had a double-double. He's an absolute beast. Really good player. 11 points, 14 rebounds. The problem for Detroit, obviously, they're shooting. They shoot 39%, an ugly 10 for 35 from deep. We have talked glowingly about Cade Cunningham on this program for a while now, and deservedly so. Everybody should recognize that. He's going to be an all-star on Thursday. If he's not, there should be some type of investigation into why not. But even though he had 22 to lead the team, he was a miserable 9 of 26 from the floor. He started, I believe, 1 for his first 12. It's not a recipe for success for your team. And I thought last night, I don't want to say that it's the only time this year, because I'm sure there's been 1 or 2 occasions. But for the most part, when you've watched him this year, you've marveled at his all-around game. You've been able to recognize how good he has become in so many different facets of the game. It's one of the things I think J.B. Bickerstaff has done a really good job. He's helped a lot of these younger pros, younger players, Jalen Duren, Cade Cunningham, some of the others. But Cunningham has been a much better all-around player. Last night, I thought he forced way too much. I thought he became, dare I say, selfish early on, taking some ill-advised shots. Of course, they're always ill-advised when you don't make them, right? But overall, I didn't think it looked like he was in the flow in which he needed to be, and I think the Pistons paid for it. Michigan bounces back from their blowout loss at Purdue by beating Penn State 76-72. It wasn't very good either, quite honestly. It's a win. I know it's not style points, but U of M had to come from 4 down late go on a 9-0 run at the end to pick up their 15th win of the year. They're 7-2 in conference play. Wolverines forcing 18 turnovers. And, got a team best 21 from Trey Donaldson, 11-9 from Danny Wolf. U of M hit 12 triples, shot 48.5%. Nittany Lions just aren't very good. Those are games you're supposed to win, and they did. Latest college top 25 basketball poll, MSU moves up a spot to number 7 in the country thanks to their 12-game winning streak. The top 5 stay intact. It's Auburn. It's Duke, who got 28 from Cooper Flagg last night to hold off NC State. That dude is so flipping good. Do yourself a favor. If you want to watch a complete college basketball player, watch Duke play.
It's a lot of fun to watch him.
He's a lot of fun. Iowa State is 3. Alabama is 4. Florida is 5. Houston climbs up a spot to number 6. Then it's Michigan State. Purdue comes in at number 10. Oregon is at number 16. Then it's Wisconsin. And then it's Illinois, or Oregon 15, excuse me. Wisconsin 16. Illinois 17. Michigan is out, and so is West Virginia. There is the synopsis of the Big Ten right there in the latest top 25. All right, latest poll question for you. Do you think the Red Wings are a playoff team? And folks, we can get a better judgment on this. I know it's about expectations at the beginning of the year. I understand that. That's cool. You know, whatever you thought was going to happen, I thought what was going to happen last year was going to be a closer playoff push, and they did get close to the playoffs. They tied Washington for the final playoff spot, but lost on tiebreakers. Right now, Detroit at 53 points overall. And if you had to look at the playoff picture, Detroit would be knocking on that proverbial door. They and Montreal each with 53 points, Columbus with 55, and Tampa with 55. Detroit just beat Tampa 2-0, and they just beat Montreal as well. Are they a playoff team? We are 50 games deep. Detroit is 50 games deep into their schedule. So 32 games remaining. I think it's a fair question at this stage. If you wanted to ask it before the year, I get it. If you wanted to ask it at the midway point, I get it. We are pretty close to the 3-quarter mark, so I thought we'd ask it one more time here before we actually see it come to fruition at the very end of the season. You can vote as often as you like at XB Mornings on X, and we will give you the results in the 8 o'clock hour tomorrow. Love the fact that Michigan State is now number 7 in the top 25 poll. You and I both know that it's not a huge deal right now, but this is an NCAA tournament team at 17-2, at winners 12 in a row, 8-0 in conference play, 4-0 on the road in conference play. Tells you an awful lot about this team. And as I mentioned yesterday, and by the way, they get Minnesota tonight at home at 8 o'clock. It tells you an awful lot about this team, I think, when Tom Izzo comes out and says, we're pretty good. It takes a lot for that man specifically to say that about his team, because usually coaches like him are rarely satisfied.
He's nitpicking
and I don't
everything,
think he
right?
is satisfied. I'm not saying he is, don't by any stretch. But I do believe, that's his way of saying this team's better than just pretty good. He's not going to say we're a great team. He's not going to come out and say we're a national championship contender. Those are his expectations, but he doesn't say that stuff. He'll tell you how good they are by giving this team slight compliments, and that's one of them for sure. So State on a 12-game roll, the longest since 2018-19 when they won 13 in a row. You expect it to be a Baker's dozens tonight when they take on the Gophers at in East Lansing. What I was thinking is there's a fine line between a coach wanting to make sure his team stays focused and gets their attention, and wanting them to almost to get scared just a little bit. He doesn't want them to get too full of themselves. No coach really wants that, of course, but you don't want them to get too full of themselves. I don't think this team has played anything close to that has made you think, well, they're a little bit full of themselves.
That would make you worry.
It would make you a little concerned. He and his coaches have a much better pulse on that than just because it's a final score close game doesn't mean that suddenly they've become full of themselves. It's on how they play, and it's their demeanor and their attitude and everything, and their attention to detail. That's a really big thing, I think, for coaches. All right, when we come back, probably not the greatest sign if you're a Tigers fan. We'll talk about that when we return here on X's and Bros as we kickstart a Tuesday morning with you across the great state of Michigan.
Saturday night, April 26th.
Carry on my way.
All right, back with you 18 after the hour here on a Tuesday morning throughout the great state of Michigan. You can follow us on Twitter at XB Mornings. That's where we got the poll question. That's where we also stream live. We also stream live on YouTube and Facebook at X's and BrO's. Anytime there's a player out there who your team may want, you hope that the player likes your team too, that they want to come to play for your team. It's your city. It's a pride thing for you. You think you have a good organization. You think you come from a sports-rich city. That's what is oftentimes attributed to Detroit. Fair enough? Yeah, I think so. I think most people will tell you it's a great sports town. I think most people will tell you that the fans are passionate, and for the most part, they're knowledgeable too. Well, you're hoping that maybe, just maybe, some big names who are left out there are considering the Tigers. And Alex Bregman is in consideration for Detroit and vice versa. And that can be a good thing, obviously. He's an elite third baseman for the most part. He's a Gold Glove third baseman. He would add punch to the middle of your lineup. He would add a steady defensive influence on your infield that right now is perhaps the weakest in my lifetime. If you had Baez at short, if you have Gleyber Torres at second, if you have Colt Keith at first, that is a bad combination defensively. Yes, Javier Baez makes some incredible plays, but his throwing errors, some of his footwork, according to many coaches in the past, the various things that have plagued him in his Detroit tenure have not gone away. Not sure about third base right now. Hopefully it's Alex Bregman. Hopefully there's a way Detroit works this in. There was a report yesterday that caught my attention, and that was obviously about Alex Bregman possibly coming to Detroit, but the move that the Chicago Cubs made, and you may be going, what are you talking about? The Cubs. The Cubs aren't in the division. Alex Bregman's not going to the Cubs. No, they're not. But over the weekend, Houston did trade their closer, Ryan Presley, to Chicago. And what that allowed Houston to do is free up $5.5 million, or more than that. I'm sorry, they're picking up $5.5 million of his $14 million contract. So $8.5 million free. That helps, right? So by chopping that off the payroll, that means if they want to, they can use that money to sweeten the pot and offer to Alex Bregman. Remember, he's already turned down a contract from Houston that was, I believe, at 100. It was 156 or 165. Either way, he's looking for $200. He got much less than he expected from Houston, and they turned it down. So this gives Houston a little bit of wiggle room to try and sweeten that pot if they want to keep Alex Bregman there. Boston is in the mix. Toronto is in the mix. And it's believed Detroit is in the mix. So you may be saying, well, what does that have to do with the Tigers? Here's what it has to do. According to Chris McCoskey in the Detroit News, the Tigers reportedly had made a trade offer to Houston for Presley, which would have been nice. He's got good stuff. The offer was rejected because Presley refused to waive his no-trade clause. So he accepted the trade to the Cubs, did not accept the possibility of being traded to the Tigers. Even though A.J. Hinch is here, even though it's a really good baseball town, even though they made a strong push at the end of last season to make the playoffs, that should be concerning. That we're seeing more and more teams, or shouldn't say more and more teams, we're seeing players say, that's not where I want to go. We thought collectively, I didn't, but we thought, and as Tiger fans, that last year's push would be a difference maker. It would change the opinion of many, and it has not, unfortunately. Nolan Arenado, that would have been a nice pickup for Detroit. It's a short-term left on his contract. still a high-end player, better than what you got. There's no doubt about that. Would he have come here? So Alex Bregman says no to this 6-year 156 is what it was for Houston. Wants the extra year. I wouldn't give it to him. And wants another $44 million on the total bundle of the package to get 7 years, $200 million. I would be stunned if a team met those demands. At this stage of the game, if they met those demands, a guy who's 31 years old, all you do is you put yourself, I believe, in financial purgatory. It's just not a smart way to do business. If I'm the Tigers or I'm even the Houston Astros, but who cares about the Houston Astros? The bigger thing is that, and look, Houston has said this now for a little bit more than a week, maybe 2 weeks, that the door is cracked open for him. He's still available. It makes us look at it. They are working their way to try and meet his demands or come a little bit closer to his demands. Maybe, just maybe, and this is how negotiations work, 7 years, $200 million is not the be-all, end-all. Maybe they find a way to get there without giving him the 7 years. Maybe they find a way to get to $200 million, but not 7 years. Maybe it's a little bit more money per season, but it's more of a 6-year contract, which to me still would be too much. I'd do 5. I'd do 5, but 6, I probably wouldn't do. So, and I've been steadfast on this. I've credited the Tigers for being responsible in this regard. They are not pushing the panic button. I know we want the big name. I know people want whatever that can possibly take place. Just give us something better than what we have right now. Give us the guy who we can go out, buy his jersey. You can put a big banner someplace around the ballpark. You can use him for selling tickets. You can get in front of your season ticket base and say, this is how serious we are. This is what we've done. That is not moving the needle with Alex Cobb and Gleyber Torres. Even the most die-hard Tigers fans would have to admit that. There's no way that you have said to your friends this offseason has been an A+. There's no way you've said it's an A. There's no way you've said it's a B. And if you have, you haven't been paying attention. Jack Flaherty might make that depending on the deals. But overall, you can't be happy with what's gone on so far this offseason. Could you? Gleyber Torres at a year and $15 million? Guy who's that bad defensively? Alex Cobb, who contemplated retirement, a year and $15 million? No way. Come on. You can't think this is good enough for us. Alex Bregman might do that for you. But I feel really good that the Tigers have not caved to that. No way do you give in to demands just for the sake of getting the player. Love your thoughts on it. The Meyer Hotline, 866-838-4843. You can text the program Sports Radio to 21,000. When we come back, would you want this guy on your team? We'll explain when we return on X's and Bros.
Hey, Michigan, let's go big. I'm Herman Moore, Lions All-Pro wide receiver, and I'm talking real big-time winning on the hottest slots and table games on one incredible app, Eagle Casino and Sports.
Sign up now and get up to $1,500. That's right. We'll match your deposit.
Did you see, by the way, any of the new coaches who were hired in the NFL? Did you see the press conferences at all? Did you see Brian Schottenheimer?
I seeked out Aaron Glenn's.
Okay. So Aaron Glenn said, we're the New York Jets. We're built for this blank. The tough talk.
That was cool.
Which is it's
talk is cheap, but I think it's cool.
Yeah, I mean,
it's something to hang on to for the next few months if you're a Jets fan. How else do you get fired up, right? I mean, you just had this season from hell.
You know me. I could care less about winning a damn press conference.
Oh, I know that. But
can you do me a favor? I want you to go back, try to find me a coach that stands up and says, "This is going to be really tough, man. I mean, this is going to suck. I don't know how we're going to win. If I were you, I wouldn't necessarily renew my season tickets right now. We've got all kinds of problems, all kinds of holes. I don't know how we're going to address them in 1 year." Next question. Nobody does that.
Right.
That's the reason I say this. And I like Aaron Glenn. He deserved to get the opportunity. Brian Schottenheimer said the same damn thing. Does that fire you up at all? He said, look, we're going to win the championship. We got the right guys. But it doesn't, because Aaron Glenn is a former Lion. That's why it fires you up. You're happy for him.
Well, I'm not a Jets fan either. Yeah,
No, I know you're not.
And because
Brian
we followed
says the same thing, and you don't think it's cool.
No, you're right. Because we have followed the Lions and we followed Aaron Glenn's career. Yes, it comes off as genuine to me. I'm happy for him.
These guys outside of Liam Cohen, who turned into weird guy. I don't know what the hell happened there. I mean, go back and watch that. It is
uncomfortable.
Strange. It's uncomfortable. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where if you're the owner, you're off to the side. You're going, what the hell did we just do? Who the hell is this guy? This is not the guy that I remember talking to during the interview process at all. This is why certain teams are bad. There are certain teams that remind me of past Lions regimes. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are one of them. Look, maybe he becomes really good, but and people could sit there and criticize me. I don't care about winning a press conference. Obviously, if I'm talking about Liam Cohen being a weird guy, the press conference mattered to me. Not necessarily, because he could go out there and he could do a really good job. I'm not judging his coaching ability or him trying to inspire a fan base. I'm just saying he seemed very odd and borderline uncomfortable at his press conference. And I thought it was kind of weird. Pete Carroll, look, I mean, he's been there before. He doesn't have to win the damn press conference. The other guys, it's their first shot, and that's what they're going to do. It was just very, very odd. Our phone number on the Meyer hotline is 866-838-4843. This hour of our program, by the way, brought to you by our good friends at Ferris Coffee. And what a place that, I just love those people over there. They are really good people. They come from, it's a family-owned business for 100 years, which you got to greatly admire. They make a phenomenal product. When we were there a couple of weeks ago, I was doing the show with Rob Rubik. He couldn't say enough about the coffee. I think he had 3 cups of coffee. I had 2 hot chocolates, and it was the best. It tasted almost like a chocolate milkshake. Their store is unbelievable with all the nuts and all the various care packages you could put together for a friend in need, for example. And then I walked through their entire system that shows you how they make their coffee, where they get their coffee from, how they put together the nut packages and things like that. And of course, they're the official coffee of the Detroit Lions. They're really good people. So check them out. Ferris Coffee. They bring you this hour of X's and Bros. Let's go to the phone lines. Who's up first on this Tuesday morning, Trent?
We've got Zach, and he kind of wants to shift gears and talk a little NBA with you.
Oh, hey, Zach. How you doing, buddy?
Morning. I do want to throw out there quickly. We every year for Christmas we do those Ferris Coffee, those mixed nuts and everything to give out with family and stuff. They're phenomenal. It's great stuff.
Yeah, those people are going to be pretty happy when they get that in their stocking or under the tree, aren't they?
Yep, they are for sure. I want to pick your brain a little bit and see what your thoughts are, because it's starting to like drive me a little crazy, this whole Jimmy Butler ordeal, these suspensions and the kind of ego, the attitude, and the kind of BS that goes on. I mean, this is his third suspension now because he left the shoot around because he wasn't going to start. And how, with your experience with being around the pros and this kind of stuff, how long do they do this before there's more action taken? Because he doesn't want to go to his job every day because he's not happy. When he said just before the season how he wanted to be in Miami for his whole career.
Well, and not just that. I mean, he's going to be suspended for 5 games. Okay. So it's a 5-game suspension. That's going to take him through the NBA trade deadline, February 6th. So that kind of, I don't think it handcuffs Miami, but it is interesting that it's going to be that long. It's funny you bring this up, Zach, because this was the next topic I was moving to. Would you want him on your team? If you were a coach, player, or general manager / president of basketball ops, would you want this talented player who's getting up in age, would you want him on your team knowing that he has this capability, this type of diva personality deep down inside? Would you want him on your team?
I wouldn't. It's hard. That's a tough question because obviously you want his skill set and stuff like that, but no, you don't want that. And it reminds me of like an Aaron Rodgers situation where he's controlling whatever he wants to control because he can. And I shouldn't say he can, but I don't want that on my team.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't think I would go so far as to say it's compared to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers tried to come back from a torn Achilles heel for a team that was terrible. That to me shows me a guy who wants to play with his team, plays for his team. Is he controlling? Does he get certain things that he wants and push for that? Yeah, I don't think he's alone in that regard. I think there's a lot of superstar athletes. Magic Johnson he wanted Pat Riley in as head coach, not Paul Westhead. Paul Westhead won a championship with that team and then was gone because Magic Johnson didn't want him. Is that controlling? You're damn right it is. That's a guy with a lot of power. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't think it's unique in what Jimmy Butler has or what Aaron Rodgers has done. What Jimmy Butler's doing, I think, is complete disregard for what the team rules have always been under Pat Riley. You walk out of practice for what? Because you're not in the starting lineup after you've been suspended a couple of times, and the Miami Heat are trying to make sure that they are trying to hold it together and keep things in line with what their beliefs and philosophies have been. Not that Pat Riley walks on water, but he's been pretty successful with different coaches and in different markets. And I think he knows what it takes to play and put together a championship team. I'm a little surprised anybody would want Jimmy Butler if this is how you act when you don't always get your way. The skill set is one thing, Zach. The question is, can you be that selfish, that much of a distraction for your team, and still you overlook that for the skill set in general? I wouldn't want that personally.
No, I agree with that. It just makes me think, like, obviously it's different sports, football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is. But if you had, for example, like a St. Brown or somebody of that skill set, like a star on your team acting that way at a Lions practice or an organization within the Tigers, if Scooble did that or whatever it may be, it's gotta change the culture. But also the thing that just kind of pisses me off about the whole thing is I don't want to turn on SportsCenter and watch a 10-minute segment of how Jimmy Butler's being an idiot.
That's what you're going to get. That's what you get. Yeah. I mean, this is about, I don't think expectations is just about you and I thinking what a team's going to do before the game. The expectation is you turn on ESPN and they're going to give you the drama that is associated with the NBA. You never, if I don't know if you've ever noticed this, or even if you're a hockey fan, they don't have a reporter for hockey, do they? I mean, they carry hockey games, but they don't have anybody talking about the Connor McDavid suspension. There's no insider for hockey. There is for the NFL, there is for the NBA, and there is for Major League Baseball. Hockey's that redheaded stepchild that everybody believes should have gone back to ESPN because there's no place else for them to go, even though they get treated the way they do. There's no updates on that stuff. They may do something around the trade deadline, but overall they don't do that at all with the NHL. The thing that would bother me, and thanks for the phone call, Zach, I appreciate it. I mean, you're a good producer because that's where we were headed. The thing that would bother me is Butler's missed 9 of Miami's last 12 games because of suspensions, missing a team flight, breaking team rules, and so on and so forth. Okay. 7 games, conduct deemed detrimental to the team. I don't know exactly what happened, but still. And he's getting, look, he's financially, he's the one paying the price. Obviously, he makes enough money where it doesn't affect him that much. It's got to be really bad for him to be doing this. But how bad can it be when other players are going out there performing, abiding by the rules? Should he be an exception to the rule? Then what kind of culture are you creating? We talk about culture all the time in sports. I'm not saying this show, but in sports, we talk a lot about culture. Dan Campbell's got to go in and change the culture, and he did that. AJ Hinch has to go in and change the culture. JB Bickerstaff's got to pick up and change the culture, right? Todd McClellan's got to shift the culture to a certain extent because players didn't like playing for Derek Lalonde. Okay, all that stuff. What about when the culture's already there? Miami's fighting for a playoff spot. That's the thing that people aren't necessarily absorbing as much. Detroit, we were talking about this the other day. Detroit's the number 6 seed. Okay, it's great for Detroit. Well, they lose to Cleveland. Now they're a half game back of Miami for that 6 seed. Miami's fighting and scratching and clawing for the best playoff seeding they can get. And they're trying to do it without their best player. How do other players in that locker room feel about Jimmy Butler and what he's doing? There's a part of you that I'm sure says, look, he's my brother. He's my player on my team, so that makes him my brother, and I want to support him as much as possible. But on the other hand, I'm trying to get to the ultimate goal. One of our goals at the beginning of the season was to reach the postseason. It means a little bit more money for us. It might mean a lot of different things. We're all inspired by whatever we choose, but they got a chance to do something, and he's letting them down by acting the fool. If the culture's already there, and I think it's fair to say it's been there. Eric Spoelstra's a hell of a basketball coach. Pat Riley's been a hell of an executive. You don't win as often as those two guys have by having a crappy culture. Are you going to go in and tell Andy Reid you don't know how to put together a good culture? Look at his experience and look at the accolades that he has. Come on, give me a break, right? So I think it's fair to say that Miami understands the right culture, and I think it's fair to say that Miami possesses that culture based on the people they have running their organization and running their team. What do you do to a guy who's disrupting that culture? You suspend him. So I get why this is what happens sometimes in sports. You take one side or the other. You take the player's side or you take the organization side. I'm not fully aware of what has transpired between Jimmy, but there's been reports, but you're not fully aware of what's transpired between Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. Why has the relationship gone awry? I'm sure there's 2 sides to this story, but what I do know is that he's trying to disrupt what they have built, and what they've built has been pretty good. It's not the Boston Celtics or the Lakers in terms of championship banners, but the people they have running that organization are pretty damn good at what they do. And I would think they get there in part because of their winning culture. Here's a guy who has disrupted that, not once, not twice, but now 3 times in just this year. This has happened before, too. Why would you want that guy on your team? What does he add to your team that you think is so important that you can overlook a disruptive personality who tries to upset a culture that has already been established and has already proven to be successful?
That's what I think is so interesting about this, because a player of his caliber is doing this, and it makes you wonder, like, what is he doing to his own trade value? Maybe not even he doesn't care about that, right? He just wants to get the hell out of Miami. But the Heat are in a weird situation.
He should care about it.
But he doesn't, though. I mean, he's showing he doesn't care about it. Yeah. But I think it's interesting because it's like
his trade value goes down.
Way down. Who wants to give up much for that right now?
That's what hurt, but that hurts Miami too.
Oh, it kills Miami.
They would love to ship him off somewhere, probably. What are you going to get in return when that other team is going, dude, you're handing me an absolute headache.
Mess. And Jimmy Butler in a vacuum is worth a lot more than what they're going to get for him,
so
right?
If you're Miami, aren't you going, you know what? Then forget it. Look, it's not like this team relies solely on him. Without him, they came from 14 points down to beat Orlando the other night. Okay, so they have found ways. They know ways. They've become creative. They can get it done. You wouldn't think you would want that long term, but in the short term,
figure this out.
They can get it done. They'll figure it out. That's what makes Eric Spoelstra such a good coach. Pat Riley in a roster configuration. There's ways to get it done. You just don't want to do it long term. But I wouldn't want this guy. As good as he may have been at one point in his career, and he's still pretty damn good, right? He would you consider him the best player on Miami?
For sure.
Or would it or would it be Bam Adebayo?
Yeah, Bam's made all-star teams and stuff. Jimmy Butler is their best player for sure, I would say.
All right. I look, a guy like that, this is an interesting question. How much does character, team buy-in, if you will, matter as part of being associated to that best player tag? Can you be the best player and be a complete jackass and not be a team player?
Well, you shouldn't be able to.
Well,
but clearly,
pretty quick. I mean, Tyler Hero leads the team in scoring, but you said Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, if Jimmy Butler
Bam Adebayo leads the team in rebounds, but you said Jimmy Butler's their best player. Tyler Hero leads the team in assists, but you said Jimmy Butler is their best player.
Do you disagree? Do you think one of those guys is better than Jimmy Butler?
I really like Bam Adebayo, so I would probably say him. But Jimmy Butler's right there. I'm not trying to take anything away from it. Look, it's your opinion. That's fine. I don't think it's you answered pretty quickly. You didn't even give it a thought. And I think it's because of name recognition more than anything else. I think you immediately see, Jimmy Butler, boom, right?
Maybe because if we factor in what's going on with Jimmy Butler right now, then you're probably right. If we factor in the head case, and then I'd take Bam Adebayo over Jimmy Butler. But I just think
it's not. I don't think it's a head case. I mean, that's what Dennis Rodman was.
My point is, if you drag and drop Jimmy,
Brian Williams, who was Bison Daly, he was a head case. This guy's doing this specifically and on purpose with a point of contention against his organization.
Yeah, he wants to get out of there.
Okay. Yeah. I think part of being the best player is also, look, you're supposed to be a leader too. His leadership skills suck. Absolutely suck. And I think that factors in. Most people would say I'm crazy. Most people would side with you, Trent, and say Jimmy Butler's their best player. But I think he's also their best known player.
He's not acting like it.
And that's part of it, right?
So your
phone number on the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843. This hour has been brought to you by our friends at Ferris Coffee. We dive into some football discussion on the other side after this.
Huge here for the Michigan High School Athletic Association. You can stay up to
There are certain acts that are really tough to follow. Certain positions in sports, tough to take over for legends like Brett Favre, for example. It would be tough to fill the shoes in Indianapolis of Peyton Manning or in New England for Tom Brady, just to bring up a few, right? Really tough to take Saquon Barkley's place in New York, isn't it? I saw a funny tweet yesterday. Somebody asked, give us the example of what it would be to choose what the Giants did last offseason by sticking with Daniel Jones but getting rid of Saquon Barkley. What's the equivalent? And a Tigers fan wrote, paying Jordan Zimmerman and letting Max Scherzer go.
Oh God.
Which is pretty
I think that's
funny.
pretty fitting. Yeah.
I think it's really funny. But there are certain acts that are really tough to follow. It's going to be tough to take the place of Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, very creative. Most Lions fans, until he became the Bears head coach, which is an absolute farce that people actually are mad at a guy for taking a job just because
people are still mad.
Like Ben Johnson's supposed to go. I'll tell you what, I'll get a head coaching job, but it can't be in Green Bay, it can't be in Chicago, and it can't be in Minnesota. I'm going to eliminate
have to cross those three off the
teams
list.
To entire, no, there's the entire division. Forget it. There's no way I'm taking anything, only because the Detroit Lions is where I used to work. That's a farce, okay? And people wouldn't do that either. I mean, I suppose there are certain contracts that people have out there that say you can't go to non-compete clauses are pretty common in broadcasting. You can't go work for another radio station within that market for a certain period of time if you choose to leave. So I don't think that's unique in that regard. But I doubt Ben Johnson had anything in his contract that said you can leave for a job that is more prestigious than the one you currently own as an offensive coordinator. You just can't do it within the division. Nobody would sign that. It's idiotic. You cut down your opportunities. And as I mentioned, I thought the best opportunity of all the open jobs was in Chicago because of what they have currently. They have a team that will compete for a division title quickly. And they will do that because of much of the talent if they can fix a few things on the offensive line. Ben Johnson understands that. We had talked about this for a long period of time. What did I say? I said the best fits for Detroit. For Ben Johnson, it was Chicago. And for Aaron Glenn, it was the Jets. And I suppose there's part of me that used the frame of reference as the strengths of each team. The strength for Chicago could be their offense because of their quote-unquote skill players, and Ben Johnson could highlight those guys and make them better. The strength for the New York Jets was their defense, and I thought Aaron Glenn, going into a situation like that, being as comfortable as he can with that side of the ball, it would greatly help them. So, but I digress. John Morton is now the name that is being linked to the Lions' next offensive coordinator job, replacing Ben Johnson. According to Adam Schefter of ESPN, the Lions are working to hire him. He was the pass coordinator for the Denver Broncos the past 2 seasons under Sean Payton. He has some ties. He attended Western Michigan. He's from Rochester Hills. He's been an offensive coordinator with the Jets. He was part of the New Orleans staff with Dan Campbell. So there is a lineage there. There's a link there to their personalities. Immediately, what do you think when you see a guy come from a different organization? What do you immediately do? I immediately go to see how he did or how that team did with him in charge. Doesn't mean that's exactly what you're going to get. Like the Jets can't go, okay, Aaron Glenn had a defense in Detroit that ranked this, so this is what their defense is going to be.
But you got to base it on something.
He's the head coach, and Ben Johnson's going to be the head coach in Chicago. He's going to be the play caller too. But there is, so there's some familiarity there. I don't know if Aaron Glenn's going to have that responsibility on the defensive side of the ball with New York. But as a head coach, it's a little different than an offensive coordinator. When you're the passing coordinator, for a team, and Bo Nix, and you got to take that into consideration. You want to take a look and see how well that team did in that regard. If you look at Denver, there was nothing special about their passing game last year. They averaged 212 and a half passing yards per game. And you and I both agree that Bo Nix did a nice job. He thrust himself into the offensive rookie of the year conversation. Jaden Daniels is going to win it. Brock Bowers should be strongly considered.
But nothing to slouch at, right?
Season that he had. But Bo Nix would be, I would have taken Bo Nix and what he did ahead of Caleb Williams.
Yeah, me too. So could you argue, Shep, that doing this with the rookie quarterback makes it more impressive what Morton was able to do? Could you argue that?
You could. Yeah, I think you could.
I don't want to say doing more with less because that belittles Bo Nix, but he's still a rookie. And like you said, he had a really good year.
Touchdowns. I mean, there's 30 passing touchdowns.
Very solid year. Good. Broncos' first playoff appearance in a decade.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think their defense was as much a reason for that as John Morton in the past.
And Sean Payton,
okay?
right?
So yeah. I think therein lies the difference. But look, 30 passing touchdowns with a rookie quarterback who had to settle in. He wasn't great at the beginning of the year. It took him a little bit of time before he could feel totally comfortable. So, I take it with a little bit of grain of salt, but it is something that I looked at, okay? And then I see, obviously he was the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets in 2017. So I went back and I looked at some of those numbers, and you might find this interesting. Again, not all on John Morton because it's the talent that you have to work with. But there are ways to inspire that talent, get around it, and take advantage of what some of that so-called talent has to offer and try to get the best out of it, right? In 2017, that New York Jets offense that he ran ranked 26th in total offense at 305 points per game. They ranked 22nd in passing yards per game at 199 per contest. They ranked 16th in rushing at 106.5 yards per game, and they ranked 22nd in scoring at 18.5 points per game. It's the same Jets team that finished 5-11, last in the AFC East, and was a minus 84 in scoring. I am not going to try and convince you that this team, that Jets team in 2017, the reason that they struggled so mightily was because of the offense. But those numbers are not very endearing, are they? He's going to get a Lions offense that ranked second in total offense, all right? They ranked second in passing. And when you look at the running game, they were among the best rushing teams in the entire National Football League. So he's got a lot more talent if indeed he comes to Detroit. He's got a lot more talent coming to Detroit than he had when he was in New York with the Jets. It's not a name that many people would recognize, unless you're from Rochester Hills and unless you were with him at some, tailgate party at Western Michigan. I don't know. But I do wonder what that means for the rest of the Lions offensive staff. How does Tyler Engstrand take it? How does Hank Fraley take it? How does Scotty Montgomery look at it when you're promoting from within? The defensive side, they promote from within with Kelvin Shepard. On the offensive side, they go outside the organization. And I don't believe everybody just automatically moves up a rung on the ladder. I don't believe it's automatically, let's just stay with it. If you got a chance to improve your team, improve your staff, and you think there's a guy out there who's better, what did I say about the defense? They hired Robert Saleh. I would have been really happy. He went to San Francisco, but I would have been really happy. It's not like Detroit's the only team that goes outside the organization for crying out loud. I just wanted to give you some of the numbers associated with John Morton at some of his previous stops before we get too wrapped up in all this stuff. This is a kind of a rare shift in coaching that took place recently. I can't recall this happening, but I'm sure it has. Maybe you can refresh my memory. We'll discuss when we come back. This hour of X's and Bros is probably brought to you by our friends at Meyer. And they've got the hotline, 866-838-4843, or you can text the show, Sports Radio, to 21,000.
Saturday night, April 26th.
Carry on my
In case you missed it last night, welcome back, 18 after the hour. In case you missed it last night, fun night of watching sports in our state. Red Wings really impressive, scoring 5 consecutive goals to beat the Kings 5-2. Lucas Raymond scores number 20, also had 3 assists. Good enough for you? I think so. I think he started a little slow, but he has been an awesome player, borderline all-star type player. Dylan Larkin had another multi-point game. Not bad, right? Absolutely. Marco Kasper had a hell of a goal and finished with 3 points, has 11 points in his last 10 games. If you look at some of the younger players within the Red Wings organization, so you're happy with guys like Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin, Mo Seider, Simon Edvinsson, Marco Kasper. I think that Albert Johansson kid has been really good. You look at Elmer Soderblom. I think that's a pretty good start right there. Do you wish more from guys like Michael Rasmussen and Joe Veleno? Yes. I've been a little disappointed with those are 2 first-round picks, and I thought you would get a little bit more from them. But look, those other guys, I mean, you can see the skill set with Marco Kasper. It's fun to watch, man. I mean, when he figures it out, sometimes it takes players a little bit longer. There's always that phrase. I used to talk to players and coaches about this quite a bit. I love that phrase, the game slows down. It's not as if it's a slower game than you thought. It's more mental than anything else. When the game slows down for him, and that's kind of ironic because it's such a fast game for crying out loud. But when the game slows down for him, he's going to be a force. And he sure seems like it anyway. I don't, and in case you missed it, the Pistons lose to Cleveland. Look, Cleveland's really good, man. But that doesn't mean that you get blown out. Detroit just couldn't shoot the ball. How much of that was Detroit shooting and how much of it was Cleveland's defense? Detroit had some open looks. I thought they rushed some shots. I thought Cade Cunningham forced too much. He was 9 of 26. It was an ugly shooting night for him. It was an ugly shooting night for everybody, and it's a 110-91 final that the Cavs snap their 3-game slide. Darius Garland looked really smooth. Donovan Mitchell looked really good as usual. Evan Mobley was a force inside. It's a really good basketball team. Look, I've said this before, there are justifiable losses, right? You go into Cleveland, who is arguably, I don't know if they are right now, we'd have to wait and see for the playoffs, but regular season-wise, they're the best team in basketball. You lose it's a justifiable loss. Doesn't mean you like it. Doesn't mean you accept it. Doesn't mean it's okay, but you can almost understand it, right? Detroit's just not there yet. They're not even close to what Cleveland is. So I get it. It doesn't surprise me one bit. What did surprise me last night is Michigan's win over Penn State. Not that they beat them, but the fact that they had to come and at the very end of the game and go on a 9-0 run over the last, buck and a half plus to beat Penn State, who's just not very good. Now, while I'm watching that game a little bit, and I was flipping back and forth between 3 games because my wife had book club, which was great. So it was me and the dogs, and I'm just flipping back and forth between 3 games. There's no problem there. I'm thinking to myself, okay, how much are you being hypocritical right now? Because I was not impressed with Michigan. But on the other hand, it's not about style points. I've said that about the Lions. I've said that about a lot of teams. I don't care how you win as long as you win. And then I sit there and I want to sit there and complain about how Michigan won, how they had to stage a comeback. Do I expect them to win wire to wire? Look, at home, coming off an embarrassing loss and playing a bad team factors into my line of thinking. Fair or unfair, that's what I was contemplating last night. I'm like, they've got to have a response here after getting embarrassed. They got their doors blown off. They got the brakes blown off them when they played in West Lafayette against a good Purdue team. I'm not saying Purdue's not good, but if Michigan is supposed to be close to that, and that's what many people believe, that Michigan, I had somebody tell me yesterday, Michigan and Michigan State are Elite 8 teams. I'm like, have you watched Michigan? They're not an Elite 8 team. They were when they went on that nice run and they were clicking. Something has happened over the last couple of weeks that gives you some pause. And last night kind of reinforced that. Michigan State being Elite 18, you could definitely see that. Not just because they've won 12 in a row or because they're 8-0 in the conference or 4-0 on the road in the conference, but it's because of how they go about their business. You don't have to win every single game for me to think, or anybody to think, I would hope, that this team's an Elite 18, because you're not going undefeated, all right? It's how you respond in certain situations. Michigan's response against a bad team last night at home in what was a very quiet Chrysler Center for the most part was not that impressive. I expected more. Sorry if I expected more and you're a Michigan basketball fan and you're disappointed in my take, but that's the reality of it. They should have been able to do things better than what they did. Penn State generally, kind of a turnover machine, 18 turnovers last night. You win by 4. I expected a little bit more. Latest college basketball poll, top 25, MSU is number 7. Here's the top 5. It's Auburn. It's Duke, who got 28 from Cooper Flagg last night. Dude was unbelievable. Iowa State, Alabama, and Florida. Houston's up to number 6. Then it's MSU at 7. Purdue pulls in at number 10. It's Oregon 15, Wisconsin 16, Illinois 17, Michigan and West Virginia are out. And our poll question for you is, do you think the Red Wings are a playoff team? Yes or no. Vote as often as you like. We'll give the results in the 8 o'clock hour tomorrow. And this hour of X's and Bros is proudly brought to you by our friends at Meijer. There was a shift in Big Ten football. You could argue there are 3 programs, 3 of the elite football programs in the country that are in search or could be in search for defensive coordinators. Notre Dame needs one. Michigan might need one because Wink Martindale is flirting with a number of NFL teams. That's not a surprise. No Michigan fan thought he was coming here and this is where it's going to last, right? He's going to ride off into the sunset as the Michigan defensive coordinator. You didn't think that, did you? I hope not. He's not a guy who's going to go into a 17-year-old's living room and say, how you doing? This is how we see you fit. It would be great to have you in the maize and blue and all this other stuff. That's not who he is. He wants to be an NFL guy. He's one of those guys who would probably, with the head coach, close the deal. But he's not going to recruit teenagers to try and come to Michigan. He doesn't feel like he should have to do that. You want to come to Michigan and play linebacker or safety or defensive end or some defensive position, understand you're getting a guy who's made his living in the National Football League calling defensive coverages and defensive plays. So that should be enough to at least make you consider wanting to come to Michigan. I don't think it's an arrogance thing. I think it's one of those situations where, look, you should know, if you follow football, you should know who he is. Is that fair? I think so. So Michigan is probably going to be looking for one. Ohio State is now looking for one. Because Jim Knowles, their defensive coordinator, who helped them win a national championship, and who by many reports was not as involved in the defensive play calling after the Michigan game as originally thought, is going to Penn State. He's the highest paid assistant coach in the country at $3.1 million. No excuses for James Franklin now. That's for certain. They must feel like this is the time where they can make the move and become the elite in the Big Ten. Speaking of elite, a national publication gave the Lions a much lower grade than I probably would have. We'll talk of that when we come back on X's and Bros on a Tuesday morning.
Saturday night, April 26th.
Carry on.
talked earlier today about John Morton, who appears to be the new offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. They're in discussion with that. Nothing's been official yet. But the belief is the Rochester Hills native and former Western Michigan Bronco will come to Detroit after being the passing coordinator in Denver over the last 2 years to be the Lions' new OC. John Gruden, for what this is worth, and John Gruden, you can say what you want about him, as despicable as the things he said, he does know football. And he said, if you get a guy like John Morton, then you should basically have a glass of Cabernet, the finest Cabernet you can find, in a salute to him being your new offensive coordinator. Sometimes, here's my issue, sometimes with guys like that who are lifers. And it's not necessarily a knock on them, but we all get caught up in our emotions. And I think sometimes coaches, past general managers want their guys to succeed and be put in really good situations. So they're always going to say, this is fantastic for them. And this is going to be ideal for you. I mean, this is what Ernie Accorsi said. I shouldn't compare the two, but I'm just using this as an example. All right. I'm not saying John Morton's the equivalent to Bob Quinn at his job. But when Ernie Accorsi, remember when the Lions were looking for a general manager, they were replacing Martin Mayhew. They needed some help. They went to the National Football League. They said, we'll help you. They give you Ernie Accorsi, who had success before with the Colts and the Giants and has been around the NFL for a long time. You would think knows general managers. You would think knows good football people. And where did that path lead them? It led them to Bob Quinn of the New England Patriots. Ernie Accorsi, with a relationship with Bob Quinn, wanted to see him do well. After that, he was gone. It didn't matter. Ernie Accorsi did what he considered his job, made his money, whatever. It's not like it's killing his reputation. People had given him a reputation about some of the other things that he had done. Not many people outside of Detroit remember that he was an influential piece of Bob Quinn coming here. Again, not comparing John Morton to Bob Quinn and not comparing John Gruden to Ernie Accorsi, but sometimes you take those things with a grain of salt because people become attached to those who they respect and work with for an extended period of time. When Jim Caldwell, and you know how I feel about that. I love Jim Caldwell. When Jim Caldwell was hired, remember how Peyton Manning was just raving left and right? How much did that matter? Because he worked with Jim Caldwell. He believed in Jim Caldwell. You should do that. But sometimes you don't always, I don't think you should always take that as the gospel. And that solidifies my belief that John Gruden thinks he's good, that absolutely the Lions should have hired him. Let's go to the phone lines. The Meyer hotline is 866-838-4843. Who's next up on this Tuesday morning?
Yeah, we've got Mark, and actually, Shep, he wants to go back to the Jimmy Butler conversation.
Oh, hey, Mark, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning. Hey, I wanted to get your opinion on this situation. Remember when John Elway was at, I think, Stanford, right?
Correct. Yep, that's where he went to school.
Okay. And he signed with the Yankees, and it gave him a little bit of leverage, but everybody kind of knew that he wanted football. And he told the Colts when they were in Baltimore that he didn't want anything to do with that team, and if they drafted him, he's just going to go play for George Steinbrenner.
That's correct.
I'm wondering, I didn't know what to think about that way back in the day. I thought it was pretty arrogant. I didn't know if he made the right decision. Like, I didn't think Rick Leach made the right decision going and playing baseball. I think he should have played football, but that's another subject. But anyways, just two parts to this question. What did you think of Elway's attitude toward the NFL? And I don't know how he got such a bad taste in his mouth with Baltimore Colts. And do you think he really did his career better? I think he would have been a superstar in baseball. So I got to hang up. I'd like to listen to your show, and I want to hear if you think that he would have been a better baseball player than a football player.
Well, I don't recall. I appreciate the phone call, Mark. I don't recall John Elway as a baseball player at Stanford. We all remember him as a football player at Stanford, had one of the greatest arms you've ever seen. In case people are unaware, in 1983, the Colts had the number 1 overall pick. And it's interesting that Mark brings that up because that's Ernie Accorsi was in charge. He was the general manager. So he was going to draft John Elway no matter what. John Elway was the best player in that 1983 draft. And John Elway's father came out and said, look, he's not going to play for the Ursays. He's not going to play for Frank Kush, who is the head coach. So don't draft him. We're giving you a warning shot. Do not draft him. He's not going to sign. And what ends up doing, he is the number 1 overall pick. He then is traded from when he uses the leverage of the Yankees. He is traded to Denver for Mark Herman, Chris Hinton, and a 1984 first-round pick, which ended up being Ron Soule. I know it's crazy. Although I will tell you this, Chris Hinton was a hell of a player, absolutely phenomenal offensive lineman. Here's what the deal was. He never played for the Yankees, but I do know that he hit 318 over 40 games in the summer before he was drafted in their Class A minor league team, for what that's worth. I think he made the right choice. Remember, Eli Manning did the same thing. Eli Manning didn't want to go to San Diego, so he and his father made sure that there was some type of move in the cards to have him go to the Giants. And who ends up going to San Diego? Phillip Rivers, right? He ends up going to the Chargers. Is that the same thing as Jimmy Butler? You don't have a team that you're necessarily quitting on. You are trying to create your destination. I don't like it because you go into a sport knowing full well what the rules are. You're entering the NFL draft. You know what the rules are. If you and your agent want to find a way to better your situation, and you have that with that team, teams make trades all the time on draft day, don't they? Teams are willing to say, I don't want this player. Why can't a player say the same thing about the team? I think it can create a little bit of chaotic environment. It hasn't happened a ton, but I mean, that's a really good example. As far as Rick Leach is concerned, the reason you choose baseball a lot of times is remember, he was a running quarterback. Look, he was a hell of a college football player. He was in the Heisman Trophy balloting, 3 straight years, I believe. That's how good he was. Before Jim Harbaugh saying J.J. McCarthy is the greatest quarterback at Michigan ever, most people would have said that it's Rick Leach, and a lot of people probably still do. But I think he might have gotten an idea of where he would have been drafted, how effective he could have been, and baseball gives you a longer shelf life. He was a first-round pick in baseball. So can you really say he made the wrong choice? I don't know what he would have been in the National Football League, but can you say he made the wrong choice when you're a first-round pick? Some people think Kirk Gibson would have been just as good, if not better, in football. He would have been a top 10 football pick had he come out and decided to play in the National Football League, but he was a first-round pick. So is that wrong? Kenny Lofton, basketball at Arizona, baseball. I mean, there's a lot of guys who have been excellent in more than one sport, but chosen a specific sport. And then a lot of people like to wonder, would they have been better at the other had they chosen that other sport and done it and been fully committed to it? You know what I mean? How much better would Bo Jackson have been if he were strictly a baseball player instead of a football player? You can make the argument he would have been a much better baseball player because his hip, remember, he injured his hip. He broke his hip in football. If he doesn't do that, that probably doesn't happen in baseball.
Yeah, you're probably not breaking your hip in baseball.
Right.
What do you think of Kyler
I mean, the way
Murray?
he played, I suppose the way he played, the aggressiveness in which he played, diving for balls, running up outfield walls, sliding into second base. And so maybe you could see that, but I doubt it. Not the way he did in football.
Not like in football, right?
Yeah. So I'm not so sure about Rick Leach. I think anytime you're a first-round pick, you probably made the right pick, made the right choice. I don't know what he would have been like in the NFL. I don't know what his skill, if his skill set would have transformed well enough in the National Football League. I think it would have been really good for today, the way players are today. Look, you could make this debate, could you not? If Tim Tebow could get starts in the National Football League, couldn't Rick Leach have got? He threw better than Tim Tebow, a lot better, and they were both really good runners. What were you going to say? Did you say we got a text?
No, we do have a text, but quickly, I wanted your thoughts on Kyler Murray. Because I remember when
first round pick.
He was he was like winning the Heisman and stuff, and then was going to play baseball. And then if you remember, it all happened really quickly. The Cardinals went out and, they fired, what was his name? After 1 year, the coach. They moved on from their coach after 1 year. They hired Cliff Kingsbury. There was this whole vision, and it all happened so fast. So I just, to your point,
he was
about
a first round pick by the Oakland
decision,
A's. He was a high pick by the Oakland A's.
He probably could have been a pretty solid baseball player, and who knows? But
I don't know.
Go from that to then be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and you're right. It is. It's remarkable. I try not to contemplate or even guess how good a guy is going to be just because you're a first round pick. Look, I hate to get too personal with this. How's Casey Mize been as a first round pick, as a 1-1?
Yeah, and
Spencer Torkelson was a hell of a lot better college baseball player than Kyler Murray was, and he was 1-1. So when somebody says, "Well, he probably would have been a really good baseball player," I don't know that.
Yeah, it's not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
How good was Matt Anderson? He was 1-1. He wasn't very good. How long did it take Mickey Moriak to get to the Major League Baseball bigs? It took him a long time, and he was taken ahead of some really good baseball players. I just don't know.
But to be that level of athlete is just my point. To be a first round great. By the way, Steve Wilkes was the Arizona coach that got fired after 1 year.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And they shifted their entire organizational view to go after Kyler Murray. That's pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, I would say this. You're right. I love talking about these things. These are the when you talk about guys who have been drafted in numerous sports.
Both
so they bring up Deion Sanders. Brian Jordan doesn't get nearly enough love. All, as far as I'm concerned, pale in comparison to Dave Winfield. Because Dave Winfield could have been he was a Major League Baseball player, a 12-time All-Star, and he's a Hall of Famer. He could have been drafted in the NBA, okay, because he was a basketball player at the University of Minnesota in the Big Ten. That's where he was going. He went there to play baseball, and then basketball-wise, coaching staff saw him play basketball and gave him a scholarship. All right, so he was a hell of a basketball player. Played 2 seasons there. Was an All-American at Minnesota, and he could have played professional football too, because of his size as a wide receiver. Think about it. I mean, he's got over 3,000 hits. He's got close to I don't think he has 500 homers, but he's got close to 500 homers. He's a tall, big, strong dude. Vikings, he never played college football, but the Vikings picked him in the 17th round in 1973. That's how good Dave Winfield was.
465 homers, 12-time All-Star selection in the MLB.
Yeah. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's not bad.
You'd take that.
You're doing that, and you're starting on your college basketball team in the Big Ten. Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This isn't Wolford. I mean, that's pretty damn good. And then I know it's a 17th round pick, but there's been some great players drafted late in NFL draft history. Considering his size, like everybody says, LeBron James could play tight end in the National Football League. Really? The last time you saw him play was when? But if I say that about Dave Winfield, people will go, "Oh, I don't know about that." What are you kidding me? Dave Winfield dwarfs those guys in terms of athleticism. Phenomenal player. Absolutely phenomenal. All right. National publication came out with grades. These, I always get a kick out of that. Rating the teams and how they did this past season. And a lot depends, as we all know, on expectations, how you finish, a lot of things like that. All right. What's the grade you would have given the Detroit Lions this year? This is a national publication. They gave them probably a lower grade than I would have. They chose to grade the teams that have been eliminated.
Okay, quick question. Do they factor in the playoffs?
But first, let me get to a text. Sports Radio 21,000. What's the text?
Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes seem to be great friends, but can Brad put that to the side and ask Dan about questionable calls or missed calls in games?
Well, I think most times, you're the general manager, you're the head coach. I don't know if they're great friends. They're great. They have a great working relationship because they're on the same page. And yes, You have to be able to have those tough conversations. Ryan Day and Jim Knowles were really close at Ohio State, and Jim Knowles left. So I do believe that is necessary, and I do believe it happens. I doubt Brad Holmes dissects every play call from Dan Campbell. Are there I bet you could say there's questionable play calling from the greatest coaches who ever walked this earth all the time. There are times, I'm sure, general managers are wondering, why is he starting this guy instead of that guy in baseball? Why in the world would you give this guy so many minutes compared to this guy in basketball or hockey? But it's an interesting question. Do you think Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell meet at the end of the year like they do every year? And they're talking constantly. But do you think they sit down and they go, listen, I was just wondering, that game against Green Bay, why'd you go for it on 4th down and allow this call to be called? I don't think that's the case. But I'm sure there are things that they've both discussed on what they would like to see better. And if you're Brad Holmes, you're probably saying to Dan Campbell, there are certain things we've got to improve upon. And what are those things? Is it play calling? Is it going for it on 4th down? I think Brad Holmes understands who Dan Campbell is, and I think he embraces that. And I think he also understands that's a big reason why his team's been in the mix over the last 2 years. Doesn't mean that it's always going to end right. Doesn't always mean that he agrees with him. But Brad Holmes' job is to put the roster together. Dan Campbell's job is to win with that roster. And if he doesn't win with the roster that Brad Holmes thinks is good enough, then he won't be there as a head coach. Friends or not, you can still be friends. It just doesn't mean it's going to work out. So I think they meet on a regular basis, but also at the end of the season, they're going over stuff. I doubt they're considering what calls were made in what situation and why he did it. Maybe personnel, but I doubt those calls. Phone number on the Wire hotline, 866-838-4843, or text our program, Sports Radio 21,000. This hour of X's and Bros, proudly brought to you by our friends at Meyer. When we come back, we will get into those grades by one national publication. We've got the Daily Wager and the results from yesterday's poll question coming up next.
Hey, Michigan, let's go big. I'm Herman Moore, Lions All-Pro wide receiver, and I'm talking real big-time winning on the hottest slots and table games on
Get some facts and come back and see me. Get some facts and come back and see me. Don't throw out salaries or other things. Get some facts and come back and see me.
You can't handle the truth.
I told our players, you need to be more like a dog. We don't need a bunch of cats in here. Yeah, looking in the mirror. Do I look good? I got my extra bands on. I got my other shoes on. Be a dog. We don't need no meows. We don't need no cats. We need more dogs.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
We weren't good. There's no sense asking me things about the game. I'm telling you, we laid an egg, so I'm not going to break it down for you. We sucked. We sucked. We laid an egg. That's all I have to say, guys. I'm sorry. I'm not going to break it down for you. Nothing went well for us. It's on us. We have to figure it out, and we will.
It's showtime.
Okay, final hour of the program, and this hour of X's and Bros proudly brought to you by our friends at Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort, and especially their sportsbook, Ascend. Welcome, everybody, here throughout the great state of Michigan, Monday through Friday, 6 until 9. Wherever it is you may be listening, we appreciate it. You could be in Cadillac or Grand Rapids or Kalamazoo or Holland or Lansing or Petoskey or Charlevoix or Traverse City. Maybe you're watching us streaming on X at XB Mornings or on Facebook or on YouTube on X's and Bros. We appreciate it very much. Red Wings and Michigan a winner last night. Pistons end up falling down in Cleveland, and Michigan State up to number 7 in the latest college basketball poll. Our poll question for today is simply this. Do you think the Red Wings are a playoff team? Really impressive 5-2 win over the Kings last night that saw Lucas Raymond continue on his tear, that saw Dylan Larkin stay involved, Alex DeBrincat score. It was a well-played hockey game for Detroit. They actually scored 5 unanswered. They were down 2-0 and then scored 5 in a row. So do you think the Red Wings are a playoff team? It's a simple yes or no response. You can follow us on Twitter at XB Mornings. Vote as often as you like. The results come in the 8 o'clock hour tomorrow morning, and we'll have the results from yesterday's poll question coming up here. This will be an interesting topic. 8:35. We will get into one owner in this sport wants a drastic change and how the teams operate. We'll get to that at 8:35. I did want to, since I teased this, I do want to bring this up. SI.com gave their final grades for teams that haven't reached the Super Bowl. All right. And I looked at the NFC. I didn't care what they gave the Buffalo Bills or the Baltimore Ravens or anything. Obviously, you go right to the team that you follow and is your favorite team. So you go to the Lions. What would your final grade be for the Lions? They asked for the team MVP. They asked for the best moment and the worst moment. What would your grade be for the Lions? They gave them a B. Overall, they gave the Lions a B for the season. They said the MVP is Jared Goff. They considered the best moment the Lions' dominating win over the Vikings, and the worst moment, their loss to the Commanders. To me, a B is a little low. And when I tell you all the time about it's about expectations, this is a perfect example of this national publication judging the Lions based on expectation. Expectation before the year and expectation when the regular season concluded. 15-2, tied for the best record in the NFL, winning the division, having home field throughout for the first time in the history of their franchise, all those things, and they give them a B, which, look, if you want to give them a B because you thought before the year they would be Super Bowl bound, I did. At the end of the regular season, you thought they'd be Super Bowl bound, I did. And at the very least, thought they would beat Washington, I did. I get it, okay? But oftentimes, too, I think you have to take this, their grading scale, and measure it about what they're giving other teams. For example, if you're going to give the Lions a B, immediately I think, what would you give the Minnesota Vikings? And they give the Minnesota Vikings an A. And yet they won one fewer game, were eliminated in the first round, and it's a team that many people feared going into the postseason would be a club that could make a run. And yet they give them a higher grade. Why? I'll tell you why. because the expectation before the year and throughout the entire regular season was that this team would fall down, especially with Sam Darnold. We talked about it through the entire regular season.
We did. We were
didn't
consistent.
want to believe in Sam Darnold, and I get it because of his track record. I totally understand it. You didn't think Minnesota was all that great, and then suddenly they're playing Detroit in the final regular season game for the number 1 seed in the National Football Conference, and finally, it took all that time for people to actually go, you know what? Maybe they are pretty good. Then when they lose 31-9, then you pile back on and say they really aren't. But the expectation was not very high for Minnesota, so they get an A. The Washington Commanders, A+.
A+. They should
Why?
get an A+.
Because the expectation with a new coach and a rookie quarterback was not very high. And look at how they exceeded those expectations. And I'm not saying that's the wrong grade either. I'm just saying this is part of the Los Angeles Rams. What do you think? They play in arguably the weakest division in the NFC. I would say the NFC South, but some people, considering the Niners were down with injuries,
right,
considering Seattle's not very good, right, considering Arizona's not very – look, it's not nearly as good as the NFC North. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think that's
it's
more
not
than
as good
fair.
as the NFC East, right? Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, the Rams won it at what, 9-8? So did they go 9-8 or 10-7?
10 wins. No, they had
okay,
10
either
wins.
way, they won their division with 9 or 10 wins.
But here's the deal: they give them an A-. They give the Rams an A- for their performance this year. Again, expectations. One more for you: the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you don't think the NFC West is the worst division in the NFC, then the NFC South is the other logical answer to it.
Right.
Do you know what their grade was? A B+. So they're getting a better grade at 10-8, losing home field in the first round of the playoffs than the Lions, who went 15-2, had the number 1 seed, and have a much better roster.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So I think a lot of this comes back to when people kind of roll their eyes and say, "Oh, Shep, you and your expectations." Yes, because these are more examples of what I've preached forever. That when you go into certain situations, that's why I make sure everybody understands what is your expectation. It's okay to be high. It's okay to have really high expectations. It's not like I would have given Detroit an A+, but I sure wouldn't. I sure wouldn't give Tampa a B+, and I wouldn't give the Rams an A-, and I wouldn't give Minnesota an A. If it takes that much to get an A, then the Lions should be getting an A.
Yeah, and how about this? So the Bucs and the Lions both lost to the same team. They both lost at home to the Commanders, to a rookie quarterback. So yes, you can throw that dig in there. But the Lions going 15-2 in the regular season, I think, would give you enough grace to say they deserve a better grade than the 10-7 Buccaneers, who won, like you said, Shep, arguably the weakest division in football.
Right.
So there's that aspect of it too.
The Tampa, and I know it's not always about the end record. Okay, Minnesota finishes 14-4, Lions finish 15-3. Look, if that's the logic, then you would give the Lions a higher grade than Washington, since Detroit had more wins than Washington, and that's not the way it works. That's why expectations are all part of this discussion. What is it you were thinking? I said this at the end of the baseball season last year because my expectation was not met by the Detroit Tigers. My expectation for the Lions was not met. This is not as successful a season as you would have expected. It's not a failure, but it's not as a successful a season as you would have expected. I would not have given them a B. Or if I was forced to no pluses or minuses, B would have been an A. But I sure as hell wouldn't give Tampa, the Rams, and Minnesota the grades that they received. Our phone number on the Meyer Hotline, 866-838-4843. You can text the program Sports Radio to 21,000. At the bottom of the hour, 8:35, we will talk about one specific owner in this sport wanting to change the financial landscape of his sport. When we come back, the daily wager update, another winner for Trent, and update numbers on our poll question of the day. That's coming up next on X's and Bros.
Attention, Michigan fans. It isn't a Michigan
18 after the hour. Welcome back, X's and Bros. Again, at 8:35, we will talk about an owner in this sport wanting to change the financial landscape of his sport. And I'm not sure he completely understands what the other sports do. So we'll get to that coming up at 8:35. Before we get to the final results of the poll question and the daily wager, Dave Burkett of the Free Press had a pretty good synopsis of how the Lions are looking at their free agents or who is available with free agents and what they have to do. He'll look at the defense tomorrow, but the offensive free agents for Detroit, there's not many hard choices. You've got Kevin Zeitler, who's the starting right guard, 16 out of the 17 games he started, and I think pretty damn consistent. I've always liked him ever since he came out of Wisconsin. I've liked him in Cincinnati and the different stops that he's been. I think he's a hell of a player. He signed a one-year, $6 million deal last spring. I would hope that they would get him back on a one-year deal. The others, which it's a little surprising to me, I'd forgotten about this. I don't think there's a great sense of urgency to sign any of them. I mean, from a feel-good standpoint, I suppose there is. All right. Dan Skipper. Okay. Yeah. Dan Skipper's been a nice player for 8 years in Detroit. I don't care if he's a fan favorite, to be honest with you, but he's a third tackle. He's a swing tackle.
Depth.
And depth is important. The thing you have to ask yourself, though, remember that they have tried to address this before. The Lions have. Gio Manu is a guy they drafted. Did he show you enough? That's up to the Lions to decide. I don't know.
Well, I should say he was a healthy scratch.
You're quick to answer.
Yeah,
I don't know that, but I
didn't play much.
I think in this upcoming draft, they're going to address that again too. I mean, the trenches is an area that Detroit is going to have to address. And I think that's a fair point. So I don't know if it's an automatic, yes, we got to bring back Dan Skipper because he caught a touchdown pass and people really like him and he's fun to have around and he's a great locker room guy. You can find younger, great locker room guys who are as versatile or maybe even better at that position. I'm not saying I don't want him. I'm just saying it's not a foregone conclusion. I think with Zeitler, it should be a foregone conclusion. I can't say that it's automatic that you bring Tim Patrick back or Dan Skipper or Allen Robinson or Teddy Bridgewater. Those are the offensive free agents. It's really not that hard, is it? It's for sure one guy. The others, with all due respect to them, we're all replaceable in this world. Take or leave. Are you going to fall to your knees and start crying like Selena Gomez and say, Tim Patrick's not back with the Lions? Oh my God, what are we going to do? I don't think you are.
I'm a little higher on the Tim Patrick re-sign idea than you are, but I agree with your sentiment that the Lions free agency situation, especially on offense, is great.
I like Tim Patrick. This is not, 33 catches, 400 yards.
I think he was an upgrade from Josh
That's
Reynolds.
pretty damn good, right? When healthy, pretty damn good. It's a great story too. And I root for players like that. I truly do. But is he an automatic, I got to have him back? I think there are a lot of third wide receivers out there, folks, that you can go out and get. I don't think it's if I'm Brad Holmes and I'm trying to decide and I'm writing down on a piece of paper, these are the goals for the offseason. These are the guys I've got to bring back. These are the guys I'm looking at to possibly draft. These are the areas I need to shore up. These are the coaches we'd have to bring in. I don't think Tim Patrick is super high on that list. Kevin Zeitler is one of my top priorities. There's the difference. All right, let's get to yesterday's poll question, and we'll get to the daily wager as well, because Trent's been on a major role with the daily wager. With the poll question, we asked you this yesterday. Which team impressed you most on Sunday? The two winning teams, Philadelphia, Kansas City. I don't think you're going to put Buffalo in there because suddenly Josh Allen is 0 for 4 in the playoffs against Kansas City. That's not part of the conversation. And there's no way it can be Washington when they turn it over as often as they did and they got their doors blown off, allowing 55 points. So we gave you the two options, Philadelphia or Kansas City. I think I know where it's going, especially because of the angst people have toward one team. Let's hear the final results.
74%. Overwhelming majority said Philadelphia Eagles impressed them more on Sunday.
I thought it was going to be over 80%.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, they blew the doors off the Commanders, like you said. And the Chiefs, I know people are sick of them. That probably had something to do with these results a little bit as well.
Yeah, we brought this up.
They did only win by a field goal. So I think it's worthy.
Yeah, what I would say a better team, though. They beat a better team. I think
that
Buffalo's
is true.
better than Washington. But they've spoken. That's cool. The thing that bothered, we brought this up yesterday, the Travis Kelce head bob after Patrick Mahomes gets tackled in the end zone, and what I would consider taunting. We've seen taunting penalties called all season long. Some egregious, some maybe a little questionable. Why doesn't these are the things that the NFL sets itself up for?
Yeah.
Again, I said this yesterday, I'll reiterate. I don't think there's a conspiracy here. But why I don't know if people remember the clip, but go back and you can search it and you can find it easily. Why doesn't he get a penalty for that? Not like they would have taken the touchdown off the board. I don't even know if it would have changed the game. It's the principle of the call or the non-call. It's the principle of the rule. Why doesn't he get flagged for a play like that? I'll guarantee you, Trent, if Jamison Williams does that,
that flag is
Jared
flying
Goff
up.
finds his way around the corner and slips inside to get the touchdown. If Jamison Williams comes in and starts bobbing his head like a weeble and starts trash talking, and the referee's right there, like he's a groomsman in their wedding, that's how close he was. Guaranteed he gets a flag.
Shep, he can't throw it fast enough. He can't get that laundry out of his pocket fast enough.
Right. And don't give me this, it's based on Jamison Williams' reputation, because Travis Kelce's reputation is just as bad when it comes to that kind of stuff. Over and over and over again, we've seen it. All right, let's get to the daily wager. We give you one every single day. That's why it's called daily. Where Trent gives you an idea of what you think you should be placing your bet on. Now, I don't know if he's won over. Is it your grandfather? I don't know if you've won over your grandfather, who constantly ripped you early on when you made this segment and you weren't very successful.
It's my buddy Jake's grandfather,
recently,
yes.
Yeah, your buddy's grandfather should be coming to you now and say, you know what, kid, you're getting better, because you are. It's brought to you by Soaring Eagle Casinos Ascend, their sports book. Fantastic place last night. Would have been ideal to sit back and watch 3 games at once. Michigan, Penn State. Michigan wins. They go on a 9-0 run to end it. Red Wings and Kings, they score 5 unanswered, win it 5-2. Pistons and Cavs, Detroit struggled from the floor. Perfect time. You can go back there again tonight. You can watch Michigan State play Minnesota, and the Spartans extend their winning streak to 13 in a row. It's at Ascend at Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort. What is the daily wager today, and how good were you last night?
Last night we had Lucas Raymond to score a goal, plus 235, decent value on it, and he scored a goal in the Wings 5-2 win. Part of the 5 unanswered goals. Nice win.
Scored their first goal on a nasty looking backhander. It was sweet.
Good looking goal. Tonight, we've got a fun little parlay, Shep.
Okay.
We've got a lot of good college hoops tonight. Okay, I'll start there. But I'll go with CMU, the Chippewas, your Chippewas. They're 7.5-point favorites at Buffalo. And Michigan State is 13.5-point favorites at Minnesota, or at home against Minnesota.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm parlaying those two together. You bet $5 on it, you're walking away with 17. So if you like CMU and Michigan State to both cover the spread tonight, that's the play.
5-0-1 in his last 6. That's what Trent is. So go with it, and you can hear about it tomorrow when we join you here on X's and Bros between 6 and 9, like we do Monday through Friday. All right, when we come back, there is an owner in one sport wanting to change the financial landscape, and a wild statistic that not many have talked about after the conference championship games. We'll get to all that when we wrap things up here on a Tuesday morning on X's and Bros after this.
It's time to go on the court.
Just a reminder to get into DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring keys touchdowns is the key to winning in the postseason. You know that better than anybody. And if you're ready to place your first bet, try betting on something simple like a player ready to score 6. So go to DraftKings Sportsbook. Go to their app. It's really easy. You can make your pick. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 bonus bets instantly. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code HUGE. That code is HUGE. And for first-time bettors, you bet $5, you get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 years or older. Michigan only. Eligibility restrictions do apply. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. And for additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.com/audio. There has been a lot of talk over the years, and I think especially over the last 5 or so years, because the Dodgers have been so successful spending money, luring free agents. Mets have spent gobs of money. I think it was $315 million a year ago, about a Major League Baseball salary cap. That's what people oftentimes come up to me and say, why doesn't baseball have a salary cap? Recently, Baltimore Orioles their owner, David Rubenstein, said he wished baseball had a salary cap. This is what he said. He said, I wish it would be the case that we would have a salary cap in baseball the way other sports do. And maybe eventually we will, but we don't have that right now. I suspect we will probably have something closer to what the NFL and the NBA have, but there's no guarantee of that. He's a smart guy. You don't make the kind of money he's made, run an operation the way they do, and they've been pretty successful the last couple of years, unless you know what you're talking about. I do ask myself this, though, when owners talk so flippantly about things like this. Do they truly understand what those caps are about? The NBA has a salary cap. They also have a salary floor. So the salary cap for the NBA this year, I believe, is at $155 million. Do you know what the floor is? 90% of the cap. You've got to pay a minimum of 90% of the 155. The NFL salary cap is between $265 and $275 million. And you might say, my God, I can't believe it's that much higher than the NBA. Remember, you got 51 guys you pay for, 52 guys. Anyway, it's up 5 to 8% per season. No team can exceed that cap, but teams cannot hold on to money perpetually. Teams have to spend 89% of the cap over a 4-year period. So there's a ceiling or cap, and there's a floor. The NHL has a hard salary cap, no exceptions, about $92.5 million. It's risen every year since it's been instituted. The floor is right around 74, 75% or so. So teams are forced to spend money. If Major League Baseball did that, let's say the salary cap is, the Mets had the highest payroll last year. When the season ended, the Mets payroll was at $315 million. It was $314,785,000. So I'm rounding up. The lowest payroll resided in Oakland, where their payroll was at $62,132,000. That is a massive gap, isn't it? The average, so if you looked at the number 15 team out of the 30 teams in Major League Baseball, the San Diego Padres, which might surprise people considering the names they have there and how much money you thought they were spending for them. You know, Tatis Jr., Bogarts, Darvish, all these Cronenworth, some decent sized contracts for these guys. But they're at 15, $170,855,000 at the end of the year. So what do you think the cap would be in Major League Baseball? Let's call it 200 mil. That's the cap. Let's call it 200 million. The middle, as I mentioned, about 171 million. So the average team was actually, the average was about $166.5 million. That means the floor would have to be around, if it's similar to that of other leagues, around 80 to 90%, right? Does that make sense? The floor would have to be at about 80 to 90% of $200 million, or right around $170 million. That would have to be the floor. If the cap was 200, then the floor would have to be around 170. Baltimore last year was at 109 million. So that's why I ask myself all the time, do these owners truly understand? They see the cap. Do they know the teams, when they're part of these leagues, in the NBA, NHL, and NFL, those leagues have basically said, we want you, you've got to spend money. You can't just say, well, there's a cap and then there's no floor and everybody decides, you know what, basically collusion, we're going to spend $80 million. It's not the way it works. If you're going to cap something, then in order to get something in return during the negotiations, the players union would tell the owners, you've got to spend at least X amount of dollars to make sure the landscape is more competitive. You would think owners would want to do that anyway, give themselves a chance to win. I'm not saying everybody should go out and use a Juan Soto-like contract, okay? I'm not suggesting you go out there and you spend $700 million on Shohei Ohtani and every team has to have a guy like that. No. But is it truly fair to the fans of some of these teams that their teams aren't willing to spend? And I know, look, the owners could come right back and say, wait a minute, Milwaukee won their division and they ranked 21st in payroll at $114 million. Cleveland won their division. Their manager was manager of the year. They ranked 23rd in Major League Baseball and spent $105 million. Why should you have to pay $170? Because you're putting a cap on, a limit on how much these teams and these players can make. Then you should at least have a floor of where they begin. So let's say it's 170. What would that mean to your team? That would mean $74 million of spending for the Tigers. That's if this Baltimore owner got the way what he wanted. We need a cap. Owners meetings, he's going to be pushing for that. If he's talking about it out loud on a podcast, he's no doubt talking amongst his peers, how do we get to a cap? My hope is that one of those wise businessmen who own a Major League Baseball team is saying to them, you realize, you're using these examples of the NBA and the NFL. You could throw the NHL in there too. You realize they have floors, right? They're forcing teams to spend money. Teams like Oakland and Cleveland and Milwaukee and Seattle and Detroit, they're not going to like that. They're not voting for that. They're not voting for they'd vote for the cap, but they're not voting for a floor because they're getting by without it right now. See, that would mean 15 teams would have to increase their payroll and 15 teams would have to cut. It would also mean that Steve Cohen and the Mets, as upsetting as it may be for some of the owners in baseball, in Miami and Detroit and Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Milwaukee and Oakland, as upsetting as it may be to those owners that they would have to reach a floor, it would be twice as maddening for owners like Steve Cohen of the Mets, who would have to slice $145 million if the scenario is what we just brought up. If you want that, you'd have to give players more of the financial pie because they get 48% right now. They get 48% of all revenue. So you would have to give them more. Owners aren't surrendering that. Maybe they would go 51-49. Maybe. I doubt it. But this is what it comes down to. So I think it's funny when I hear owners talk of this and they leave out the one part. They're doing the interview and they're like, yeah, I think we really need a cap. Hold on. There's more to the story there. The Paul Harvey line. What's the rest of the story? The interviewer should immediately follow up and say, then what's the floor? because the other sports have floors. They're forcing you to spend some money. How are you going to get teams on board like Minnesota, like Kansas City? Kansas City had a really good season. They've got some really good players. They're at $122.5 million. You'd have to get them if the cap were 200. And I don't know what it would be, but if the cap were 200, if you're going to fall in line, if you're going to use these other leagues as templates, then it's going to be about 80% or so. You're getting to 107. How are you going to convince the people in Kansas City that you've got to up the ante a little bit? $48 million. That's not going to be an easy sell. And you know who in the end it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt you and I. I'm not saying it's a perfect situation right now. I don't like it. I think it's bullcrap that you can have one team spend $314 million. The two teams in New York combined spend $622 million. Just those two teams. Those are the top teams. But they've got great TV contracts. They've got more accessible, more available to them than the other teams. Kansas City doesn't have that capability with their television contract. Hell, they don't even have a network. They're doing that in-house. Minnesota, the same situation. Milwaukee's another year on FanDuel, I guess, is what I've heard. Oakland, what's their TV rights? Are they bringing in that much money? Hell no. There's very few teams that now have that luxury. Boston's got it with Nesson. New York's got it with Yes. The Mets have it. Maybe Philadelphia with NBC Sports Philly. It's something that all these guys have to take into consideration. And for some reason or another, it just doesn't seem to register very well. Our phone number on the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843. You can always text us, Sports Radio to 21,000. This hour of X's and Bros proudly brought to you by our friends at Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort. The NFC Championship game that saw the Eagles blow out Washington had a very interesting little nugget of information too. Jalen Hurts, he rushed for a few touchdowns. I don't think he was great. I sure wouldn't put him as a top 10 quarterback, believe it or not. I mean, he's led his team to a Super Bowl for the second time in his young career. They may win it. I think Philly's really good. I'm going to pick them to win. Part of that is with my heart, but I think they're really good. He became the first quarterback to lose in his Super Bowl debut as a starter and return to the championship game since Jim Kelly did that in 1992. At least 19 quarterbacks to make their Super Bowl debut as a starter lost, never returned to play in the game again until Hurts snapped that streak. Here are some of the 19 quarterbacks who went to the Super Bowl in their debut but never got back. Drew Bledsoe. He was a backup to Tom Brady in 2001. Okay, so he wasn't a starter. Steve McNair. Lost his Super Bowl debut, never got back. Jake Delhomme, Carolina. I know people, that's one of those things that blows your mind, right? You're like, wait a minute, Lions have never been, but Carolina has. Jake Delhomme was the quarterback who led Carolina to the freaking Super Bowl. Lost, never got back.
Is Cam Newton on that list? Another Carolina quarterback?
He would be on that list.
Yeah, because he got there in 2015, Super Bowl 50, and never got back.
Donovan McNabb got there with Philly, never got back. Colin Kaepernick got there with Frisco, never got back. Jared Goff is part of that list. Got there with the Rams, hasn't gotten back there.
Get off that list, yeah.
Jimmy Garoppolo got there, never got back. Joe Burrow got there, never got back. Got back to the championship game, NFC championship game or AFC championship game. Goff got back to the NFC championship game, not the Super Bowl. Burrow got to the AFC championship game, not the Super Bowl. That's a pretty interesting list there. So since 1991, here are a few of the others. Brock Purdy is part of that list. Matt Ryan. You mentioned Cam Newton. Rex Grossman. Think about it for a minute. If you say the most, and I say this all the time, the most important position in football, I could argue sports, is quarterback. Think of some of the guys who have led their team to a Super Bowl. Do you remember Rex Grossman? Rex Grossman at Florida with Chicago, played against the Colts. Peyton Manning's first Super Bowl came at their expense, even though Devin Hester took the opening kickoff for 6. Matt Hasselbeck, Seattle. He's a really good analyst. He's a good quarterback, wasn't a great quarterback, led his team to a Super Bowl. I mentioned Jake Delhomme. Rich Gannon was the MVP, not with Kansas City when he played, but with the Raiders. Led his team to a Super Bowl. Never got back. Kerry Collins. It's a high draft pick out of Penn State. Led his team to a Super Bowl. Never got back when he was with the Giants. Chris Chandler led the Falcons to a Super Bowl. He did it in 1998. Never got back. Stan Humphries led Bobby Ross's San Diego Chargers to a Super Bowl in 1994. Never got back. Neil O'Donnell led the Steelers to a Super Bowl and was awful, throwing 2 terrible picks in 1995 and never got back. So when I read some of the names, I sometimes think to myself, wait a minute. There are people who actually, you don't think Jared Goff can get his team to a Super Bowl, even though he's done it already once before? People called us, was it last week or was it Monday? I think it was last week. They said we're delusional. Folks, look at some of the names I just read who've gotten their teams to the Super Bowl, including Jared Goff. And Jared Goff's a hell of a lot better than Jake Delhomme, for crying out loud.
Right.
Well, let's get to a text real quick before we say goodbye here on this Tuesday morning. Go ahead.
Yeah, this one says the Lions should sign Joe Flacco as their backup quarterback.
Nope. Can't say that I would want that. It has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with how he played last year. And I thought he was terrible, especially in key moments. So, no.
I do think, I would ask you,
he did catch lightning in a bottle with
that?
Cleveland 2 years ago, and he was really good, but he sure wasn't very good last year.
Do you think they have to address the backup situation? Because Teddy's not coming back, right? He's probably going to go coach football again.
Reaching out for Teddy Bridgewater was a problem in the first place.
No doubt. But then clearly they don't believe in Hendon Hooker because they're going to get Teddy Bridgewater.
Huh?
I said clearly they don't believe in Hendon Hooker if they're going out to get Teddy Bridgewater.
Obviously.
So
that's the point. Where are the people who wanted Hendon Hooker to start 2 years ago? Where's the text that said we should trade Hendon Hooker for a first-round pick and he gets beat out by a guy who just led his team to a high school state championship as a coach?
Yikes.
Come on. It's ridiculous. Yes. Obviously, Hendon Hooker has not progressed as much as they would have liked. So it needs to be addressed. But it's not with Joe Flacco. Our thanks to you for your texts. Thanks to your phone calls. Appreciate it as always. It's awesome being with you every Monday through Friday, 6 until 9 here on the Michigan Sports Network. We're back with you tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody. Don't forget the huge show later on these same station affiliates, 3 to 6 across the great state of Michigan.
The Freddie the Pizza Man Foundation is dedicated to